Well, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Let me just get my volume here. How are you folks doing today? Nice to be here. Took a couple days off. So, there we go. It's a Sunday, the 1st of February, 9:16 a.m. I was up early this morning. My wife was up at 4:30. There's a big election today. It's for the new president of Costa Rica, and then you vote for your local representative in the federal government. Which, I mean, based on population, it amounts to you know a medium-sized city government compared to New York or Canada. I think the population of Toronto is just about probably about 170% of the entire population of Costa Rica. Tiny little country, as are most Central American countries. They're basically city states with lots of farmland. But it's a fairly big deal. Costa Rica is changing in this new climate of American leadership out of the United States, and America here being the continent. And we're building one of those giant CCOT prisons, just like El Salvador. Bukele's been here numerous times. And I was watching a piece on Al Jazeera last night about the drug violence in Costa Rica. I mean, even Al Jazeera is covering it. Now, I live in the very heart of it, like literally not only the province where most of it comes from, but the region where most of it comes from. As you all know, I've had two of the biggest, the only two, um, well, that's not true now because they're extraditing a lot of people, but the first two major Drug Enforcement Agency warrants issued in Costa Rica. Both of the gentlemen were neighbors of mine. Both of them were mass murderers, and within the framework of that business, and both of them, one of them is dead. I just had his wife up. He got shot about 5 years ago, and his wife was up just last weekend. She had a coffee with us, and she has a lot up here on the mountain, and she wants to sell it. So she wanted my wife's help for that. Let me just grab a coffee here. Yeah. And it's interesting to sort of see the entirety of this lifestyle in all its forms. The people left to grieve after loved ones are killed, widows, fatherless sons, fatherless daughters, stuff like that. And it just is what it is. But I think the party's over in Costa Rica. So everyone I know who's associated with the business is kind of pulling out now. Um, this is the way it has to be, I guess. And it's going to turn this place into a relatively beautiful country. I think Daniel Ortega in Nicaragua is on the hit list of the State Department. Now, let me be explicit about this, okay? I am 100% in favor of this. I think the experiment we call liberalism, which was largely a baby boomer phenomenon, the Berkeley kids all grown up, it's finished. I've been thinking a lot about this, and I've been trying to think about it from the perspective of everybody. Um, and that includes our own defense and intelligence forces in the Western world, specifically in the United States. Um, and what their responsibilities are. And I was contemplating it just the other day and this morning, and it occurred to me to put myself in their position. You have to defend a way of life, which is the Western way of life, which is largely predicated on freedom. And you have to do it against countries that have autocratic rule, conscription, and many other advantages for a nation state. You know, people often quote Justin Trudeau when he said he admired the basic dictatorship of China, but they never listened to the full quote. And far be it from me to defend Justin Trudeau. You know how I feel about that twink. I think he's a psychopath. I think he's an MK Ultra product. There's no doubt in my mind now. Um, that pairing with Katy Perry is completely arranged. Oh, got a little doggy in here. Hey, baby, you've been running in the mud. Holy cow! Come on. Yeah, you want to hang out? You want to hang out? If I close the door, are you gonna sleep quietly in here? I don't know. You want to stay or you want to go? No, she wants to go. Okay. You're a good girl. Got her and the little guy Petey off the leash now. You can only have one of the adults and the puppy off the leash at the same time. Anything more than that is just, it's problematic in ways you can't imagine. So, where was I? Oh yeah, Justin Trudeau. Yeah, that's an MK Ultra pairing. They both have those empty eyes, crazy eyes. But when he said that he admired the basic dictatorship of China, what the follow up statement he made was they can change on a dime. I mean, they can do a hard right turn. They can move the ship of their nation in ways and with a dexterity that Western nations are absolutely incapable of. We have to go through rigorous process, oversight committees, lunatics like Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer and people like this, AOC and Ilhan Omar. And as far as I'm concerned, at this stage in history, they are domestic subversives. They are trying to subvert America. And whether they're doing it consciously or they've been brainwashed by the Democratic National Congress, whether they've got some plan they show people when they're in the inner circle and it makes sense if you see it and don't think about it too much, I don't know. But these people are all swayed to a position of subversion of the United States. And it's despicable. I don't understand how people could be born to the most opportunity rich country in the world. And remember, opportunity is God's currency. So we could say that this is a country that was blessed by God. And all these people do is complain. And why? Because they're godless, and godless people cannot receive blessings from God. They don't recognize the blessing, they don't acknowledge it, they don't receive it with gratitude. And this is part of the problem we're in now. But to clarify, Justin Trudeau meant the dexterity and mobility of these countries, how quickly they can do things, how quickly they can move into certain industries. There's no regulation, there's no environmental protection agency, there's no oversight committees, there's no opposition. It's just, this is what we're going to do. They discuss it for a little bit and they do it. And so, how do you defend a country against forces like that? That do not have the democratic process and do not have the rigorous oversight and layers of examination that we have in Western society. And it is true, Justin Trudeau is right. There are times when all of that oversight and all of that stuff just becomes an albatross and you can't change your society. And so the program they came up with to make these changes in Western society is largely centered in the World Economic Forum. So we're going, whether we like it or not, we're going to a property-less existence, which I don't think things will really change that. Well, I got to be careful here. Things will change. Things will become much more difficult. And I think there will be much more, obviously, much more centralized control. And I guess it depends where you live, what you're doing, things like this. It's certainly affecting Canadians right now. It's certainly affecting Americans right now. And one of the things that is underneath all of this stuff is the amorphous truth. What is the truth? Nobody knows anymore. Or they do and they don't care. I don't know. I look at these people in Minnesota, and I don't know what they're thinking. Do they not believe the intelligence briefings when we are told that a fifth column of military-aged men entered the United States? That 200,000 Chinese who crossed the border, all military-aged men, and I've read some background on this now. Nothing definitive, nothing I would go to court with, but convincing enough to speak aloud on the Talamanca Review that not only were these military-aged men from China, much of them were special operators. Many of them were special operators, Chinese special forces. And anybody trained in special forces is extremely dangerous. They can do all kinds of things. They can take out power stations. Special operations is about crippling cities and countries. Okay? And is it true? I think it is. Maybe not to the numbers they're giving, but absolutely, I think it's true. Are we in a war now? Absolutely. Has Canada chosen a side in this war? Is that side China? Yes. Will it come about that, you see, Canada can't exist on its own, neither can Australia. The truth is that most of the countries in the Western world went up against forces like Iran and Russia and China are at the mercy of the will of the United States, whether the United States decides to protect them or not. Now, given the status between the United States and Europe now, Europe has decided it has to go on its own, and they're arming up big time, fully arming, right? And so things like this are generally a precursor to war. So, and the United States has pulled out of the United Nations, stopped much of its funding to the United Nations. So it's a clear sign that these post-World War II institutions are no longer working. And many people in the West have grown comfortable in the idea that we do not live in a dangerous world. We absolutely do live in a dangerous world. When state-sponsored actors like China are pumping loads of fentanyl, a deadly drug that creates more overdoses than any drug in history, when a state actor like China is pumping the precursors and aiding and abetting the manufacturers and producers in Canada and Mexico to flood Canada and the United States with this drug, I would call that an act of war. You could call it karma for the opium addiction that the British induced in China by giving them lots of opium because they ran out of gold and silver to trade for tea, and the English were addicted to tea. And I'd say, well, yeah, you're right. That is kind of a quid pro quo. We did do that to China. You know, does China just want to balance the scales now? How long does it go? How long did the opium addiction go? I don't know. Probably a few decades. But I don't think it is China balancing the scale. I think it's the rest of the world coming to the realization that we are the most dangerous thing on the planet. Because under our God, which is the Hebrew God, morphed into the Christian God and morphed into the Islamic God, it's all the same God basically at the end of the day, and it's a corrupt conceptual God. It's not the real God. Um, we have taken it upon ourselves to take over the lives of anyone we deem to be uncivilized. And civilized, by our definition, means you worship our God, you follow our morality, you know? So how could you, being a non-Western nation, not take that as a threat? It's impossible. So here we are, and here's the state we're in. So the question becomes, going back to it, is how does a nation that values freedom of speech, freedom of expression, and human freedom, as the West does for the most part, like I'll be the first to admit it's slipping a lot, and you could make a cogent argument that there's always been an absence of freedom in the West due to all of the subversive programs in our intelligence agencies, CIA, MI6, things like this. But still, we seem to have a greater expression of freedom in the West than anybody else. For example, if you wanted to be a communist in the United States and you were able to find 250,000 people who thought the same as you could go collectively, pull your money together. You could go and you could buy land and you could build your homes and you could build your community and you could function as a completely communist kibbutz or city state right smack dab in the middle of the United States. How many countries in the world, how many societies in the world do you know who allow that level of freedom? The answer is none. We're the only one. Now, that freedom has become something of a noose around our neck. It is the harbinger of doom. And because we don't very well police a lot of the thinking, and when I say thinking, I mean slow, deliberate, gestated thinking that enters into our academic circles, trains the next generation, and you have all of these anti-American people, and they don't realize what they have. I realize it because I've lived around the world. I'm no smarter than anybody. I just have more experience. Okay? And there's no place like the West. And there probably never will be again, at least in this cycle of history. So we have to respect it. There's no other way around it. We have to respect this. Does this mean that we don't check our government when it does horrible shit? No, of course we do. Sometimes they get caught, sometimes they don't. Sometimes they get punished, sometimes they don't. Iran-Contra was an example where there was a modicum of punishment on people like Oliver North, but that was a bit of a farce too. I think the CIA just completely played Reagan. Um, Now, we're in a big punishment cycle now. We're in the Donald J. Trump punishment cycle. And he's a horrible human being, Donald Trump. He has personality defects when he's in his public persona that are so egregious. It's mind-boggling to me now that nobody has taken him aside and had a talk with him. But that's the nature of who and what he is. He's not going to change. He definitely has dictatorial tendencies. He just loves his awards and stuff. There's a certain kind of mindset, that absolutely adores being publicly celebrated. And people like this are very weak. People like this are very stupid, very venal, very corrupt, and spiritually immature. We see it all the time. When is it Abby Hoffman? Was no, 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 no. Hang on a sec. Let me just find this. I can't believe I'm blanking on this, but who was the American poet who wrote Howl? Allen Ginsberg. I don't even have to wait for the AI. It just popped into my head. On his deathbed, Allen Ginsberg directly petitioned um, President Bill Clinton, called him up and said, I'm going to die soon. Is there any award you could give me before I die? I mean, there's something seriously wrong with people who think that way. You know, it's a very, very defunct and decrepit way of thinking and completely anti spiritual, very Jewish. Okay, there it is again. It's very Jewish. Okay. And let's be honest, the West has become very Jewish in a lot of ways. And it's not who we are. It's not who we are. It's not a Christian society. Christian society operates quietly without need for ego recognition, you know? But because we live in a world where the powerful ethnocentrism of Jews dominates, and ethnocentrism means they need to be represented in everything. It's like an ego thing with them. We have incidentally become a very Jewish culture. Okay. And I would suggest to you, as I have many times on the Talamanca Review, that the reason for that is we're being set up to be the scapegoats. Okay. It is a privilege to have a human life. It is an absolute privilege. I say this from years of research and practice in the spiritual arts. This human life is unique in the universe. It's different than an extraterrestrial existence. It's different than an angelic existence, a demonic existence, an animal existence, an insect existence, a sea life existence, a bird existence, a human. The human life is the ability to work with all of the energies consciously, the physical energies, the psychic energies, the spiritual energies, and to become aware of the fact that we are not the flesh. We are the spirit and the soul. And this is unique only to human beings, you know? Those of you who read Stardust Ranch, you know that the gray alien is not the same as us. I think many of them are actually robots or a kind of organic robot. Evolution from this human form is granted to people who commit to service to spirit and the correct way of living and demonstrating it and educating other people on it. That is the true purpose of a human life, is to become fully human, and human means spirit and flesh. And knowing that your spirit, knowing that your soul, spirit being your thoughts and your feelings, purified by contact with or awareness of the soul. And this is the unique opportunity of being a human being. But we don't see it that way anymore. Everybody wants their name in the history books. I'm the guy that invented blah, blah, blah. I'm the guy that found penicillin. I'm the one that split the atom. I'm the one that did this. And it's all vainglorious nonsense. None of it's really helped humanity. We're not going into a brave new world. We might if we can wrest the technology from the depraved people who are in control of it now and seed it into true human beings who find a spiritual purpose for the technology, right? It's just mind boggling. Anyways, on another note, I did another book, okay? And this book is May Brussel. And May Brussel was a very interesting person. Let me just find the book here. Yeah, there we go. May Brussel was the. Oh, there we go. Yeah. Let me just read you the introduction here. So, May Brussel, um, who lived from 1923 to 1988, not a very long life, was a trailblazing American researcher and radio broadcaster who dedicated her life to uncovering the truth behind some of the most significant political events of the 20th century. Born in Kansas City, Missouri, she began her career as a housewife in Beverly Hills, California. But her life took an unexpected turn when she became captivated by the Kennedy assassination and embarked on a journey that would make her one of America's most prescient conspiracy researchers. Brussel's transformation from a conventional housewife to a pioneering conspiracy researcher was gradual but profound. Growing up in the heartland of America, she was initially insulated from the darker currents of political intrigue that would later consume her life's work. Her father, a successful businessman, instilled in her a strong sense of independence and critical thinking, qualities that would prove invaluable in her later research endeavors. Her mother, a voracious reader and intellectual, encouraged her daughter's curiosity about world events and history. These formative influences laid the groundwork for Brussel's eventual deep dive into the labyrinthine world of political conspiracies. Now, the catalyst for Brussel's transformation came on November 22nd, 1963, when President John F. Kennedy was assassinated in Dallas, Texas. And like millions of Americans, she watched in horror as the news unfolded on the television screen across the nation. However, unlike many who accepted the official narrative presented by the Warren Commission, Brussels sensed that something was amiss. Her intuitive skepticism, honed by years of observing human nature and power dynamics, told her that the story being presented to the public was incomplete at best and deliberately misleading at worst. Her initial foray into the Warren Commission reports was driven by a housewife's curiosity rather than professional ambition. I'm just going to stop there and say something for a sec. One of the most interesting things about Miss Brussel is that she was Jewish. She is really the beginning of public conspiracy theory. No May Brussel, no Bill Cooper, no Jordan Maxwell, no Alan Watt, none of these people. She was the trailblazer. Isn't that interesting? And so very few people have heard of her. Okay. Although her legacy has been preserved, I was able to get all of her podcasts, all of her transcripts, everything she ever wrote, and get it all downloaded to form the basis of my book. But she stands alone in this regard. And what is amazing to me about May Brussel, and this should resonate with everybody right now, she was a housewife, meaning she had no official responsibility for maintaining a house except for emotional and spiritual support of the husband and the children, which is a traditional wife's role, maintaining the house. And I don't say that in a derogatory way. That's one of the highest stations on the planet. Now, we don't, in our ego-driven world, we don't see it that way anymore. You don't get your name in the annals of history, you're nobody, according to this new way of thinking. And people will do anything for their moment of fame. People will do anything to be looked upon in the modern media coliseum. They'll do anything. They'll sell their bodies, they'll stick things in their anus on film, they'll do anything. People will do anything to be famous now. Anything to grab this public spotlight. And the first thing that tells you about a person is they don't have any love inside them. Nothing is coming through. Otherwise, they would not want the adoration of all of these strange people who, by the way, they secretly contempt. All of these pop icons and music and actors, for the most part, they despise their fan base. They hate your guts. Okay? It's not a warm and open relationship like the Talamanca Review and its listeners. So, another thing that amazes me about May is she proved that anybody can do something meaningful. And this is becoming more and more relevant now. And the reason it's becoming more and more relevant is more and more people have free time now. And I think this is going to become something of a norm as we move to some form of UBI, universal basic income. I say to people when they come up here, you have to know what you're doing up here. Time can absolutely destroy a human being. This speaks to the old maxim, idle hands are the work of the devil. Old Protestant maxim, like Mennonite maxim, keep busy, work all day. Okay? And work is important. And nobody really talks about the importance of work. Work is a spiritual function in a physical life. Okay? I'm in between my day job, which supports my family, built the new house, is starting this tourism business. When I have free time, I do these books. And these books do not pan out economically. If my concern was only money, I wouldn't do these books. And that said, thank you to those of you who bought the books. This last month was quite good. Jordan Maxwell is very popular. Thank you for buying it. I highly recommend the Blackbird Talmud, and I highly recommend The Legacy of May Brussel, which is just being approved by Kindle now, and it should be available in a couple days. But I do it because it needs to be done. And until we have human beings that can do work out of necessity and conscience, we're not going to repair the situation here. I guarantee you, if you were to go and do a life audit of any of those dimwits protesting in Minnesota, any of those guilty white people, any of those moronic people, you wouldn't find anything too impressive in their lives beyond what they do for a living to make their money. And even that might not be impressive. I don't know what Renee Good did for a living. I know that Pretty is his name, was a intensive care nurse. Um, and that's a noble profession. There's no doubt about it. Um, but what we do with the time we're given to ourselves really defines us. If you end up in a life where all you do is make your money and in your own time, you just hit the bong and you get high, or you crack open a bottle of Johnny Walker and you get drunk, or you drink beer, or you watch TV, that free time, I'm just listening to the dogs here. I think everything's okay. That free time and what you do with it is extremely important. You know, we didn't always have time. And this is what I find so impressive about people like May Brussel. She saw it and she did it. Nobody paid her, nobody told her to do it. She saw it and she did it. Right? As was the case with Jordan Maxwell, as was the case with Bill Cooper, as was the case with Alan Watt. They saw the need and they filled it. Now, for the most part, they live as laughing stocks, conspiracy theorists, a term coined by the CIA. So I find May Brussel extremely interesting, right? Extremely interesting, and definitely a Jewish woman who was on the side of humanity, especially over the death of JFK and the Warren Commission. I don't suspect she had any clue that JFK's assassination was probably largely influenced by the Mossad, or in some ways green lit by the Mossad. I don't know if that comes up in her material. Um, but what she does is sow doubt, okay? And that was an important thing, the sowing of doubt, okay? Why are these things important, by the way? Well, believe it or not, in a democratic society, the populace that elects the people is in some measure, no, not totality, but in some measure, karmically responsible for the actions of the government. If you're living in North Korea, you're born into a system of servitude. You're not responsible for what Kim Jong un and the government of North Korea does because you have not officially been given any say in it. But in a Western society, in a democratic society, it's different. And so we are in some ways responsible for what our governments do. I mean, at the very least, we finance it. We're now financing the destruction of Iran. We're financing the empowerment of the Greater Israel Project. We're financing it directly by sending money and indirectly by supporting them on the world stage. And as far as I'm concerned, this is a grievous sin. Okay? To be on the side of Zionism in the early 21st century is probably the most grievous sin on the planet. And here we are, and the West, all on the side of Zionism. So Brussel's initial foray into the Western Warren Commission reports was driven by a housewife's curiosity rather than professional ambition. She began reading the voluminous documents during her spare time, initially looking for closure and understanding about the tragic event. However, as she delved deeper into the testimonies, exhibits, and analysis, she discovered inconsistencies and omissions that raised more questions than they answered. The more she read, the more convinced she became that the official story was a carefully constructed facade designed to obscure the true circumstances of Kennedy's death. Her methodical approach to analyzing the Warren Commission was unprecedented. Rather than simply reading the documents linearly, Brussel developed a unique cross indexing system that allowed her to track connections between witnesses, locations, and events. She created elaborate charts and diagrams on her dining room table, mapping relationships between individuals and organizations that the Commission had either overlooked or deliberately obscured. This painstaking process revealed patterns that suggested a far more complex conspiracy involving multiple actors with diverse motivations. One of Brussel's most significant discoveries was the presence of former Nazi intelligence office operatives in key positions within American institutions. Through her meticulous research, she uncovered evidence that individuals who had served in Hitler's Third Reich had been quietly integrated into American intelligence agencies through programs like Project Paperclip. May Brussels. Okay? This revelation fundamentally altered her understanding of post war American politics and the hidden forces that shaped major events. She realized the same networks responsible for some of history's darkest chapters were still operating within the corridors of power, influencing policy decisions and orchestrating events to serve their own clandestine agendas. The implications of Brussels' findings were staggering. In her analysis, if her analysis was correct, it meant that the United States government had been infiltrated by former enemies who harbored deep ideological commitments to authoritarianism and racial supremacy. These individuals, she argued, had used their positions within American institutions to manipulate events for their own benefit, including the orchestration of political assassinations and the suppression of inconvenient truths. Her research suggested that the Kennedy assassination was not an isolated incident, but part of a broader pattern of political violence orchestrated by these hidden networks. Now, I'll tell you right now, I think the thing that she missed, being Jewish, and I think most Jewish people miss this, I think most people in general miss this. I, of course, articulated it very succinctly in The Devil in Us, in the 1947 chapter. The Zionists and the Nazis are one entity now, and they have been for some time, okay? This is confirmed by I wouldn't say hard corroboration, but significant corroboration coming from people like Max Spears and James Casbolt in the 2012 Super Soldier Summit, who openly stated that there was a truce between the Zionists and the Nazis, and they had unified around the goal of planetary depopulation. And when that planetary depopulation was finished, and that doesn't mean all the people have died, but the instrumentation of the plan is finished, and I'd say it's pretty much finished now. I think it was they're well underway with the COVID vaccines and all the material they're putting into human bodies. Um, this whole system is being built for voice to skull, so um, large scale global planetary mind control, direct influence of individual minds. Nothing is private anymore. I mean, I say this in the beginning of The Devil in Us, but in that manuscript, I was referring to spiritual privacy, meaning that there's billions of beings and entities in the non-physical form that can read you like a book in a millisecond and know everything you've ever thought, everything you've ever done, your whole karmic history as a soul on the planet, know everything about you, way more than you know about yourself. So I learned very early on, it sort of hit me in my 20s that there's no privacy. You're always being watched. But here we're talking about state actors and physical entities and intelligence agencies having nearly the same level of access to you as these non-physical entities that have been part of the multidimensional fabric of this reality since the beginning. Okay? And that's a little disconcerting. Okay? Especially if their intentions are not really for the betterment of humanity. And I don't think anybody looking at the work done recently could come to the conclusion that it's for the benefit of humanity. But there are so many complexities to the situation as well. Complexities that people don't think about often. Okay? So a human being is given everything they need to exist, to survive, and to grow. And I would say that most of the human beings in the Western world now simply exist. Even survival would be the beginning of a spiritual catalyst, but they're not growing. Human beings are not growing anymore. They're getting more dense, more opaque, um, more belligerent, more flatlined. And flatlined means they don't understand the forces that work on human beings and the forces that human beings work with spiritually, psychically, in many ways. And this produces a human being that, unfortunately, thinks it's right. And they're not right. They're missing over 90% of reality if they're existing just in sense mind. Okay? Now, you see elements of it beginning to crack, and some of it coming from the scientific community with things like quantum entanglement and and stuff like this. But not it's just not sinking into people. Okay? Now getting back to May Brussel and what I consider to be the genius of her, which is that she just did it. And you'll notice this same pattern in all of these people, okay? They just did it. Now, you could make the same claim, hey, Bruce, but you could make the same claim about Karl Marx. He just wrote the Communist Manifesto because he thought humanity needed it and he suffered and he was poor. Not really. I mean, Marx was financed. He was financed by Jewish power circles in Europe. Marx was a known entity in the subculture. Marx was a made man in that world. Okay? So it's not the same thing as just doing something out of inspiration, intuition, and spiritual directive for the betterment of humanity. And this is true service. It's not, Allen Ginsberg calling up Bill Clinton and saying, "Is there any award you could give me before I pass?" That's not true service. That's self-service. Okay? So true service is something else completely. It's where you do something because it needs to be done. Okay? Which is how I live up here. I do things because they need to be done, because there's no other option, like bailing my brother in law out of his child support and stuff like that. Try to change him, try to make him a better man, but really at the end of the day, he's sort of on his own. So, no May Brussels, no conspiracy world. She began it all. And apparently, I didn't know too much about her. I started to research like what other books are available out there for me, and her name kept coming up. And I was surprised that I'd never heard about her, but she was before my time. I mean, she died when I was 22 years old. She died in 88. But there have been a lot of these sort of pioneers that have fallen away, right? Another one was Carla Turner. But Carla Turner had no choice. She had to write The Masquerade of Angels about alien abduction, and they killed her. There's no doubt in my mind they killed her. May was left alone, okay? And that's an interesting thing in and of itself that May was left alone. Um, but she's definitely another example of one of these. Carla Turner is another example of one of these pioneers. And Carla Turner is in the 90s, right? Um, let's get back to this. I'll just finish the introduction. Brussels' methodology evolved as she encountered new challenges and sources of information. She developed an extensive network of contacts within the intelligence community, academia, and journalism, many of whom provided her with classified documents and insider knowledge. Her ability to synthesize information from disparate sources and identify connections that others missed earned her respect among fellow researchers and made her a valuable resource for journalists investigating controversial topics. This is interesting. So May became a kind of an undeclared source for mainstream journalism. This is not the case with William Cooper or Jordan Maxwell or anyone like that. They've never broken out of the sort of select circles that they appeal to. There's no real mainstream recognition of them. But May was quietly working with journalists, and it had to do with the time she was living, where the integrity was still there. We still had real journalism, even though they were beginning to be beset by the mandates of editorial boards and time restrictions and censorship at the editorial level or the publishing level. Publisher tells the editor, I don't want any stories on this, and the editor tells the journalists, blah, blah, blah. But they still had a lot more freedom. I mean, this is, May Brussel, you could see her almost as an extension of that Woodward and Bernstein mentality, the guys that did the Watergate work. Her most famous predictions involved political assassinations. including those of Robert Kennedy and John Lennon. It's all in the book, too. In the case of Robert Kennedy, Brussel had warned members of the Kennedy family about his vulnerability to assassination weeks before his death, based on her analysis of patterns she had identified in previous political killings. Her prediction about John Lennon's murder was equally chilling, as she had publicly stated that the former Beatle was at risk due to his outspoken opposition to government policies and his influence on popular culture. So we get this. One of the things you're going to get reading this book is you're going to get a time capsule of when we still had a public willing to entertain ideas like this and fight against them. We still had a public that produced people like, or a system that allowed people like John Lennon, although he was originally a Tavistock production, he broke free of that and began speaking his own mind. And so they had to kill him because he had too much influence on people. Now all these people we see in the satanic cults, your Lady Gaga, your Katy Perry, and Taylor Swift, and people like this. That's the other side. That's the dark side, taking the principle of John Lennon and saying, "Hey, how can we make this work for us? How can we create public figures that influence the public but are in lockstep with what we want them to say?" And it was over. I mean, this is one thing I think this must be part of the collective memory consciousness of the baby boomers. To their credit, is they hold this time in their memories where you could maybe change things, and it died after them. I mean, I suppose there was a little bit in my generation, Gen X, but not much, not much. It had all but died, and so we arrive now at the same point of government lockdown on consciousness and expression as someone like Kim Jong un or someone like Xi Jinping. And we continue to maintain that we're free, but it's all been done at a consciousness level. It's all been done through mind control. It's all been done through television and through the repetition of basic ideas to the point where people believe them. If you repeat something long enough, people believe it. It's that simple. And that, and again, another shout out to the internal life and the internal practice. This is why practices like meditation are so important. You're breaking down all that programming. You're allowing yourself a space inside yourself to see clearly. And in that seeing clearly, you see the lies and you begin to wake up. Not that the mission of a waking person is to become a political animal and attack corrupt systems, but just being aware of them is enough so that you're not contributing to the negativity with your vote, with your counsel, with your participation. You know, one of the saddest things I heard in the last 10 years or so was when my friend Nelson told me that he could not be allowed into a Thai Buddhist forest community. So forest Buddhas they set up a kind of an ashram, but it's spread out through a forest. And there's a central area they come and eat and stuff, and they just do their meditation. And they wouldn't ordain him a Buddhist monk unless he got the COVID vaccine. And that to me represented almost the complete and absolute destruction of any sort of religious practice. And no, it wasn't uniform. There were many prominent people in the Buddhist community who spoke out against it, but that was it, right? And this is why religious and spiritual expression, or in communities that practice this, should, as a general rule, not commingle with governments. And by all means, don't take any favors from government. Okay? The 5031C designation of tax free exemption in the United States is the manner in which they control religions. And again, the Bruce McDonald maxim, here we go again. Okay? Bruce McDonald mantra. Money is the greatest weapon ever controlled. How do you control religious institutions? You give them tax-free status, provided they don't start talking about politics and contradicting the government. Otherwise, you're going to be taxed. Okay? And that's the way they do it. That's the way it's been done since the beginning of time. Now, Brussel's work was not without controversy. She faced censorship and criticism from both the media and government agencies. But her tenacity and commitment to uncovering the truth earned her a dedicated following. Her radio show reached thousands of listeners weekly, making her research accessible to a wide audience. The program, which aired for 17 years, became a beacon for those seeking alternative explanations for major events and a forum for discussing topics that mainstream media avoided. Her distinctive voice and passionate delivery style resonated with listeners who felt disconnected from official narratives and hungry for authentic information about the forces shaping our world. The technical aspects of Brussels' research methodology were as innovative as her analytical insights. She developed a sophisticated filing system that allowed her to cross reference thousands of documents. Imagine what she would have been able to do with AI. And one has to wonder if AI is going to change journalism at all. Has anybody done any significant work with the Julian Assange data dumps and things like this? It's problematic though because most of Julian's work is in PDF format, and PDF is hard to work with because it's not impossible. You can get around it, but it's more labor, more computer labor. But it's a PDF, a portable document format, is sort of cemented. It's not like a text file or a markdown file or an HTML file where you can access the plain text in UTF-8 or UTF-16 format. So, dogs. Um, um, she employed color coded tabs and indexing systems that enabled her to quickly locate relevant information when researching new leads or responding to listener inquiries. This original This organizational prowess was essential given the volume of material she processed and the complexity of the connections she sought to illuminate. Brussel's approach to gathering information was equally methodical. She cultivated relationships with whistleblowers, former intelligence officers, and journalists who had access to sensitive information. Many of these sources provided her with documents that had been suppressed by official channels or were not available through conventional means. Her ability to verify the authenticity of these materials and integrate them into her broader analytical framework demonstrated a level of expertise that rivaled professional investigators. She understood the importance of corroborating evidence and developing multiple independent sources to support her conclusions. The personal toll of Brussels' research was significant. Her marriage suffered as her obsession with uncovering the truth consumed increasing amounts of her time and energy. Friends and family members expressed concern about her fixation on dark subjects and the paranoia that sometimes accompanied her investigations. She received threatening phone calls and experienced surveillance by unknown parties, experiences that reinforced her beliefs about the dangers faced by those who challenged official narratives. Despite these challenges, she remained committed to her mission, driven by a conviction that the public deserved access to truthful information about the events shaping their lives. Now, Brussels' legacy extends far beyond her radio broadcasts and published research. She mentored a generation of independent researchers and journalists who adopted her methodologies and continued her work after her death. Her influence can be seen in the proliferation of alternative media outlets and the growing acceptance of conspiracy theories as a legitimate subject for investigation and discussion. While some criticized her for promoting paranoid thinking, others recognized her contributions to exposing government misconduct and challenging the monopoly on truth held by official institutions. That's, I think, enough of the introduction. It goes on a little bit more, but I don't know if I want to say anything more about that. Now, who did she influence? Who can we see in the modern landscape that we might suggest is an heir to May Brussel? Well, the first one that comes to mind, hands down, without a doubt, is Whitney Webb. Whitney Webb is a progenitor. May Brussel is her ancestor as a researcher and investigator. And Whitney Webb also brings to her task the same sort of vigor as May Brussel. Okay? So there's an example in the modern canon. Um, I think that's about enough for today. Oh, hang on a sec. There's just one other thing. I'll just read you the table of contents. Okay, so Chapter 1, The Warren Commission and the Awakening. Chapter 2, The Nazi Continuity Theory. Chapter 3, The California Connection. Yeah, it'll help you understand Gavin Newsom. Chapter 4, Political Assassinations. Chapter 5, Watergate and Government Corruption. Chapter 6, Mind Control and Psychological Operations. Yes, she gets into that. How could she not, researching Paperclip? 7, International Operations. 8, The Manson Family Revisited. Now, this will be interesting. It is interesting. I've read it, okay? And remember, this is way before Chaos by O'Neill, the book that just came out, okay? So she saw something fishy in the Manson family. She's so far ahead of her time, it wasn't funny. Jones, Chapter 9, Jonestown and the People's Temple. And that'll explain to you how that was a CIA operation as well. Chapter 10, 9/11 Predictions and Analysis. So she predicted 9/11 or something like it. Chapter 11, Health and Environmental Conspiracies. Chapter 12, The Research Process. Chapter 13, Contemporary Relevance. Chapter 14, The May Brussel Legacy. So, what this book does is it allows you to look at the world in the 60s and 70s before people um, like Danny Jones and Julian Doherty and Joe Rogan were empowered to speak about these things. All of this comes off the legacy of May Brussel. There'd be no Bill Cooper, no Jordan Maxwell, no Alan Watt without May Brussel. Okay? Really a pioneering figure. And I'm proud to offer this book. It's, by the way, uh, quite lengthy indeed. It is 346 pages, another big one. The biggest one so far is the Blackbird Talmud, which is, I think, 498 pages. But this is also another big book. So I'm Bruce McDonald. This has been the Talamanca Review. And I'm going to call this podcast the same as the title of the book, The Legacy of May Brussel. And I might do another podcast tonight. I'm in a podcasting mood now, so it's only 10:18 a.m. I might do another evening one to make up for the 2 days I took off. I'm Bruce McDonald, and you have yourself a wonderful Sunday.